Welcome back to Hopeful Horizon, where we bring you stories that not only touch your heart, but also make you think. Today's story is a powerful one about prejudice, misunderstanding, and the painful consequences of racial bias. It begins with a black woman simply walking down the street, holding a white baby, when suddenly she's confronted by a police officer who assumes the worst. What unfolds next will leave you speechless as we explore a confrontation that exposes the deep-rooted issues of racism and power within our society. Stay with us as we take you through a journey of resilience, the fight for dignity, and a shocking twist that reveals more than just a moment of injustice. It's a reflection of the broader struggles we face today. This is one story you won't want to miss. If you love stories that challenge your perspective and showcase unexpected moments of truth, make sure to drop a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss an inspiring story from Hopeful Horizon, and let us know where you're tuning in from. It was an ordinary day in the bustling city as Maya Johnson, a 29-year-old black woman, strolled through the park with her niece Lily, a giggling 1-year-old with curly blonde hair and blue eyes. Maya's sister, married to a white man, had asked her to babysit for the afternoon while she and her husband attended a wedding. Maya had been delighted to spend the day with her niece, and the sight of them together always brought smiles to those who passed by. However, today was different. As they approached a popular ice cream stand near the park's fountain, Maya noticed a few curious glances, more than usual. Some people stared longer than normal, whispering amongst themselves. At first, Maya shrugged it off, used to the occasional side-eye from strangers who couldn't wrap their minds around family diversity. But something in the air felt wrong. There was a tension she couldn't quite place. Just as she knelt to adjust Lily's sun hat, she heard the blaring siren of a police car approaching fast. She froze momentarily, unsure of what was happening. The car screeched to a stop in front of the park, and before she could process what was happening, a white officer, tall and broad, stormed toward her with rage in his eyes. His name tag read, Officer Riley. "You, step away from that baby," Officer Riley barked, his hand resting on his holster. His voice was filled with accusation, his tone harsh. Maya blinked, confused and taken aback by his aggressive approach. "Excuse me?" she asked, standing protectively in front of the stroller where Lily sat, wide-eyed and innocent. "I said step away," Riley shouted again, his hand now firmly gripping his baton. A few parkgoers stopped to watch, sensing the brewing conflict. "You're under arrest for kidnapping." Maya's heart raced. "Kidnapping? What are you talking about? This is my niece," she exclaimed, her voice trembling but steady, trying to stay calm for Lily's sake. She knew the world could be harsh, but never in her wildest dreams did she imagine something like this happening. "That's not your baby," Officer Riley snarled, stepping closer, looming over her. "I got a call about a suspicious woman matching your description walking around with a child that doesn't belong to her." Maya's mind reeled. She knew that someone had called the cops on her just because of the color of her skin. "You've got this all wrong," she said, her voice rising slightly in panic. "This is my sister's child." Officer Riley wasn't listening. His face twisted into a sneer, and without another word, he grabbed her arm forcefully. "You're coming with me," he said, dragging her away from the stroller. The baby began to cry, and Maya, struggling to break free, shouted, "Let me go! You're hurting me!" A crowd had begun to gather, and people were murmuring in shock, unsure of what to do. Some pulled out their phones, starting to record the scene, but no one stepped forward to help. Maya could feel the fear and humiliation rising within her. As Officer Riley tightened his grip on her arm, Maya couldn't believe what was happening. It was as if the world had shifted, turning an innocent day into a nightmare. Her pulse pounded in her ears, and she could see the disbelief in the eyes of the onlookers. But it was too late. She was in the hands of someone who had already made up his mind. The situation was spiraling out of control. Maya continued to plead with Officer Riley, but it was clear he had no interest in listening. The crowd had grown larger, whispers growing into shouts as people demanded answers for the officer's actions. Still, Riley was relentless. "I said stop resisting," Riley barked, yanking Maya's arm behind her back with even more force. Maya winced in pain, but refused to let go of her dignity. "I'm not resisting. This is a mistake," Maya yelled, her voice breaking. Her mind raced, trying to figure out how to de-escalate the situation. But before she could say anything else, Riley did the unthinkable. Without warning, his fist flew toward her face, striking her hard across the cheek. Maya's head snapped to the side, her body staggering from the force of the blow. Gasps erupted from the crowd, and someone screamed. The sound echoed through the park, cutting through the air like a knife. Maya's vision blurred as she stumbled back, clutching her face in disbelief. The sharp sting of the punch radiated across her skin, and tears welled up in her eyes. She could hear Lily wailing in the background, the baby's cries blending with the chaos of the crowd. Her legs felt weak, and for a moment, everything seemed to move in slow motion. One voice in the crowd rose above the others, a woman who had been recording the entire interaction. "Oh my God, did he just punch her? Someone help her!" More phones were raised, cameras pointed directly at Officer Riley, who stood over Maya with a sneer on his face. He looked unbothered, as if this was just another day on the job. Maya's mind raced. How could this be happening? How had she gone from a peaceful day at the park with her niece to being punched in the face by a police officer? "Stop!" a man shouted from the crowd. He stepped forward, his phone recording as well. "You can't do that! She didn't do anything wrong!" But Officer Riley ignored him, focusing solely on Maya, who was now on her knees, dazed and disoriented. He reached down to cuff her, but the crowd had reached its breaking point. "Let her go!" someone yelled. Others joined in, their voices filled with anger. "We saw what you did. You can't get away with that." A few officers had arrived on the scene, watching from a distance, uncertain of how to intervene. They had seen the video recording, but hadn't witnessed the beginning. Confusion hung in the air, and Riley's fellow officers didn't seem eager to challenge his authority. As the tension in the park continued to escalate, it was clear that this situation was far from over. And in the distance, someone was dialing the police captain, who was about to get the call that would change everything. Maya sat on the ground, her cheek throbbing, and her head still spinning from the punch. She could barely process what had just happened, but one thing was clear. The moment had been caught on camera, and the people around her were not going to let it go. The crowd had grown to nearly 50 onlookers, some still shouting for the officer to back off. Others stayed silent, their phones aimed at the unfolding drama. Officer Riley loomed over her, cuffing her hands roughly behind her back. His smug expression showed no remorse for his actions. Maya winced as the cold metal dug into her wrists. "She didn't do anything wrong," a woman shouted from the back of the crowd. "This is police brutality." "I got everything on video," another man yelled. "This is going straight to the media." Maya's heart pounded even harder now, not from the fear of what had already happened, but from the realization that this was bigger than her. The people around her were fighting for justice on her behalf, but she was still reeling from the physical and emotional shock of being punched by an officer who assumed the worst of her, just because of the color of her skin. Suddenly, the sound of more sirens pierced the air, and another police car pulled up. This time, it was the police captain, a tall man with graying hair and a firm demeanor. Captain Gregor had been in the force for decades and was known for his no-nonsense approach. As soon as he stepped out of the car, he could see the tension in the crowd and the phone cameras aimed at his officers. "What the hell is going on here?" Captain Gregor demanded, his voice booming across the park. He walked briskly toward Officer Riley, who was still holding on to Maya as if she were a dangerous criminal. Officer Riley's expression changed instantly. The smugness disappeared, replaced with a flicker of uncertainty. He stepped back from Maya, finally letting go of her arm, but it was too late. Captain Gregor scanned the scene. Maya, bruised and on the ground, the baby crying in the stroller, the crowd outraged and recording every second. His eyes narrowed in on Riley. "Riley, what did you do?" Captain Gregor asked, his voice sharp. Riley faltered, glancing nervously at the cameras. "I was responding to a report of a kidnapping. This woman was acting suspicious with the child, and when she resisted, I had to use force." Maya, still on the ground, found her voice. "That's not what happened. This is my niece. He punched me without warning because he assumed I was a criminal." Captain Gregor's jaw clenched, and he turned toward the crowd. "Who has the video?" Several hands shot up, phones held high. "We all do," one man said, stepping forward. "It's already online." Captain Gregor's face tightened with anger, but not at Maya. at Riley. He knew the damage had been done, and now the world was about to see it. The video was already spreading, and soon there would be no way to contain the fallout. "Get her uncuffed now," Captain Gregor barked at Riley. Riley hesitated for a moment, but the captain's glare made it clear there was no arguing. He fumbled with the keys, unlocking Maya's cuffs. Her wrists were red and sore from the tight restraints, but the relief of being free was overshadowed by the humiliation of what she'd just endured. The crowd murmured as Maya stood, her hands still shaking from the ordeal. Captain Gregor walked over to her, his voice low. "I'm sorry this happened," he said, though Maya could tell he wasn't just apologizing for the punch. He was apologizing for the system that allowed this to happen. But it wasn't enough. The damage had already been done. By the time Maya made it home later that night, the video had already gone viral. News outlets were picking up the story, and social media was flooded with outrage over the footage. Eater's justice for Maya was trending worldwide, with people sharing their own experiences of racial profiling and police brutality. Maya sat on the couch, her phone buzzing with notifications as messages of support poured in. Her sister Karen had rushed home after hearing about the incident and was sitting next to her, holding Lily in her arms. "I can't believe this happened to you," Karen said, her voice filled with anger and sadness. "That cop had no right to treat you like that." Maya sighed, leaning back into the couch. "He didn't even care that people were watching, Karen. He just saw me with Lily and assumed the worst. All because of my skin color." Karen's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Maya. I should have been with you." Maya shook her head. "This isn't your fault. It's bigger than us. This is about the system that lets cops like him get away with treating people like me this way." As they watched the news together, a breaking story flashed across the screen. Captain Gregor had issued a public statement earlier that evening, announcing that Officer Riley had been suspended pending an investigation. But the real shock came when the footage was played on national television. The punch, the crowd's outrage, the baby's cries, everything was laid bare for the world to see. Maya felt a sense of vindication as the anchor discussed the deeper implications of the video. It wasn't just about her. It was about the countless black men and women who had faced similar situations but never had the privilege of their stories being told. But as the night wore on, Maya couldn't help but feel conflicted. She was relieved that justice was being sought, but the trauma of what she had experienced lingered, and the fight for change wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of media coverage and public outcry. Officer Riley's face was plastered across every news outlet, his name now synonymous with the very issues of racial bias and police brutality that had plagued the country for so long. Protests erupted in cities across the nation, demanding not only his termination, but also sweeping changes in law enforcement policies. Captain Gregor, in an effort to salvage what was left of the department's reputation, made a bold move. In a televised press conference, he stripped Officer Riley of his badge and formally announced his termination. The department had also opened an internal investigation into racial profiling, vowing to implement new training protocols and accountability measures. Maya watched the press conference from her apartment, her heart pounding as Captain Gregor spoke. She couldn't believe how quickly everything had unfolded, but she also knew it had only happened because the incident had been caught on video. Without that footage, Riley would still be on the streets, abusing his power. As Gregor ended the press conference, Maya's phone buzzed with another notification. This time, it was a message from a civil rights attorney offering to represent her in a lawsuit against the police department. The path forward was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: this wasn't over. Maya turned off the TV, looking out the window at the city skyline. The fight for justice was long and exhausting, but she wasn't alone, and now the world was watching. A week had passed since the incident in the park, and Maya was still processing everything that had happened. Her cheek was healing, but the emotional scars were deeper. She had always known that racism was alive and well in the world, but experiencing it so blatantly, so violently, had shaken her to her core. But as she sat in a small cafe with Karen and Lily, something else filled her heart: a sense of hope. The outpouring of support from people all over the country had shown her that there were still good people willing to fight for what was right. She wasn't alone in this battle. A group of protesters passed by the cafe, holding signs that read, "Black Lives Matter" and "Justice for Maya." She smiled, feeling a swell of gratitude for the strangers who had taken up her cause. The fight wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been oppressed, silenced, or treated as less than human because of the color of their skin. As Maya sipped her coffee, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from her attorney. They had filed the lawsuit against the police department, and the case was gaining traction. Maya had a long road ahead, but she was ready to walk it. Lily babbled happily in her stroller, and Maya reached out to tickle her little feet. "We're going to make the world better for you," Maya whispered, feeling a surge of determination. "I promise." And as the sun set over the city, Maya knew that her story wasn't just about one woman's fight for justice. It was about a movement for change, equality, and a future where no one would have to experience what she had gone through. The world was watching, and Maya was ready to lead the way. Thank you for joining us for another powerful story here at Hopeful Horizon. Today's journey reminded us all of the harsh realities of prejudice and the importance of standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against us. As we watched this Black woman face both racial bias and injustice, we also saw her bravery and dignity shine through in the face of cruelty. Her story is a stark reminder of the work that still needs to be done to dismantle systemic racism and ensure that everyone is treated with respect, no matter the circumstances. If this story moved you, we encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another eye-opening, inspiring story from Hopeful Horizon. Together, we can continue to shine a light on injustice, celebrate resilience, and create meaningful change in our world. Thank you for watching, and until next time, stay hopeful.